And if you like this list video or any of the battle reports, feel free to subscribe. Thanks for watching. Thanks for stopping by. This is my Dyadic Legion. I've made some changes to it. This is probably the most competitive list I've built. I think it's going to work pretty well. I've tested it a few times. So far it's pretty good. I do like the idea of having a lot of bodies on the board. This isn't it, but I might try playing around with it sometime and showing that off. But so far, this seems to be the list that works quite well for me. From left to right, I have the Witch Seekers, Valerian with 5 Wardens. They have spears with the Vexilla, 5 Custodian Guard. One of them has the shield, the sword, and the Vexilla. The rest of them have spears, and they're with Kyriadraxis. Then I have another 5 Wardens kitted out like the same. They all have spears, 1 Vexilla, and they're going to be running with Trajan Valoris. And then I have 6 Terminators, all spears. Another 5 Custodian Guard, but they all have spears. They are going to be running with the Blade Champion. You can switch these characters out and around and stuff, depends on who you're fighting. Inquisitorial unit has 4 henchmen, a gun servitor, and the mystics, just so I can have that 12-inch deep strike deny. And then finally I have Witch Seekers just for scouts. And then the Blade Champion has the enhancement of Ceaseless Hunter. And what Ceaseless Hunter lets you do is if someone gets in within 9 inches of the Blade Champion's unit, you can move 6 inches. You can either move forward to get onto an objective, maybe so you can get fight first, or reroll your wounds, or just possibly move back 6 inches to make the charge harder. It also allows you to fall back and charge, fall back, maybe charge into another one, or even charge back in to get fight first again. And the game plan for this list is that you use the Inquisitorial Henchmen to have the 12-inch deep strike block around your home field objective. That way I don't have to worry about putting points into Draxis and her unit to stand on the objective. Maybe I will, it depends on the opponent, but this way I can just put 60 points into having a pretty good control of my back home field objective, and it'll stop a lot of them movement shenanigans that are quite prevalent now in a lot of lists. And the Wardens, you want to try to advance them, get them onto the objectives as fast as you can. Trajan, I usually try to put him on the midfield objective just because he's a lot more scarier to deal with. Valerian is a lot tougher to have on the objective that's closest to my deployment. And he doesn't have any access to free fight first or any free stratagems like that. He has a few other kind of tricks I'll go into as I go over each of the units. It can be a pretty good multiplier for making the unit of Wardens a lot tankier, especially against melee. In your Witch Seekers, I have them for their scout, so I can put them right on the line, and then if I go first, I can push them up onto the objectives that I want to as soon as possible. Maybe if I get aerial denial or deploy teleport homers, it's a lot easier to get these girls up there and do these objectives. They're also really good for move blocking and charge blocking from maybe World Eaters or any other army that might want to charge you turn 1 before you can get on some objectives, so you can use these Witch Seekers to scout ahead and move block anything that might try to charge you turn 1. And then the Terminators, I usually have them in Deep Strike. And then since they have Deep Strike, these Terminators, you can Rapid Ingress them, or you can bring them in from Deep Strike on your turn. And they add a nice threat for your opponent to have to worry about and always to try to screen out. And they're also a good death ball too, so if you need something dead, you put those 6 Terminators into it, and that'll pretty much kill it. And the Blade Champion's unit has 5 guard, and he's a missile. He's really used for, you can start him on the board, you can start him off the board, and he's going to go after something important, something that needs to die. You send the Blade Champion. Maybe you keep him in reserve, so when you get the chance, you can pounce on the opponent's home field objective. They have advance and charge once per game, so it allows this unit to fly up the board. The Blade Champion gives them the ability to reroll their advances and their charges, so he's reliably getting up the board fast, so you don't have to worry about rapid ingressing them or deep striking them in any kind of precarious position. They're a great missile. You can get them going fast, point them at something, and you can pretty much kill it, especially if they're on objective. They are in for a bad time if you can catch them with 5 Custodian Guard and a Blade Champion rerolling wounds. I still have Kyriadraxis. She's with the 5 Custodian Guard. I really do enjoy her shooting. I like her ability to protect me against from some indirect fire. I usually will have her kind of placed in between the middle objective, the home field objective, and the closest one to my deployment. Kind of like in the triangle there, in the middle of the triangle. This allows me to either go back and deal with something that's in my back lines, gives us support to any one of those objectives. And you also have a little bit of versatility with your characters. You can perhaps, if you really need some speed, you can put the Blade Champion with one of the Warden squads, and maybe Trajan with the Custodian Guard and just make a super nuking unit. You still only have 5 units, but it really gives you a lot of versatility now with the Custodian Guard's not as squishy to devastating wounds, same as Terminators, really your entire army, but it really brings the viability of Custodian Guard back. So I do have 10 of those, and so far I'm really enjoying them. And the henchman for 60 points is so much more reliable than trying to use prosecutors or the points into Kyriadraxis, and maybe they just ignore the home field objective all game. That's a waste of 300 points where you can just use 60 points of henchmen and do the same thing. And you really emphasize on controlling objectives with this army. You want to get up on 3 objectives as soon as possible. You have your home, have the one close to your deployment, and you want to control mid as soon as possible. I've showed a few tricks you can do on a previous video, but I'll probably make a more updated one, especially with this newer list of things we can do to help keep ourselves alive, draw people into combat, especially using a list like this when there's no tanks or any anti-tank in it really. Your anti-tank's your melee, which is quite powerful. Now I'm going to go over these units. I'm going to go over each one of them separately, just a little more in depth, my thought process of why I'm bringing these units and their jobs and their roles I have for my list. Trajan and Valerian, and they're both going to be leading Warden. These guys are going to be your main objective holders. Trajan is your more damage-oriented unit, and Valerian is your more defense-oriented unit. So sometimes you may want to put Trajan in the middle so you can use Moment Shackle, so you can use him to fight first. You don't have to worry about being on objective. You don't have to worry about being battle-shocked. So maybe you might want to put him on the main objective just to deter people from coming in. Or maybe it could be Orcs, and you may want to put Valerian up there, because his -1 AP in melee is really powerful against Orcs or War Leaders or a melee-oriented army. So you can kind of switch those around. You can even put the Blade Champion in with these Wardens if you really need to get them up the table fast, but I prefer to put Valerian and Trajan in here. You get a lot more damage over these Wardens with Trajan, because if you put a Blade Champion in there or something else, you could put Trajan in with the Guard, but just the Wardens are so much tougher, and with Trajan it makes a tough, tanky, but really potent unit as well. These guys' job is going to be holding the middle, holding your objective close to your deployment. You're not going to be using these guys to push into the enemy's units as much. These guys are your objective holders. They're going to stay put and get you primary points. And the next unit I have is the Blade Champion with the 5 Custodian Guard. These 5 Custodian Guard are a little more tanky now with the changes to devastating wounds. They're not nearly as tanky as the Wardens. The Wardens have the once per game for Feel No Pain, the -1 to wound if you're attacking with more than their toughness. But these guys can reroll wounds of 1 or reroll wounds if you control an objective. So pair them with the Blade Champion, and they're cheaper, so he's more of a missile. He's going to be spendable, but I'm not going to throw him away for nothing, but he's going to be more of a really good threat. Maybe throw him in reserves or even have him on the table, because his reroll his advances and his charges and his once per game advance and charge, it really makes a reliable threat. And then I have Ceaseless Hunter on him, so he can fall back 6 inches if something gets in within 9, or he can maybe move ahead to get on an objective, and his units have the ability to fall back and charge. Use this as a threat unit, and just to get rid of something important of the enemy that you need dead. You may lose the next turn, but maybe getting rid of this particular unit will really guarantee you the win, just because it will cause the enemy to have to come in and try to melee you out. And our next unit is Kyriadraxis with 5 Custodian Guard, 4 of them with the Spear and 1 of them with the Shield, Misericordia, and the Vexilla. Decided not to use her as a home field objective holder because it's just too expensive. So she's more of a midfield, kind of close to your deployment protector. You really be able to shift her to the mid or to the objective closest to your deployment. She kind of sit there halfway in between and threaten with some shooting or some charges. Her ability to not be shot within 18 inches, you can use that to protect you against from some long-range firepower. It won't protect you against stuff that gets closer, but you won't have to worry about indirect, and she can kind of sit there behind a wall and just be really threatening. She might be able to shoot her indirect shooting at something or come out with a charge. I still think it's a very potent unit, and she really helps with your shooting, especially against Xenos. And this is my 6-man Death Ball unit. I will either have these guys started on the table if there's a lot of Horde units that need to be shot, since they can use their grenades and really get some potent damage against Hordes, or I can have them reserve and just as a rapid ingress threat, deep strike threat. These guys can reroll in wounds against vehicles or character units, so this unit can really kill pretty much anything on the board if you can get in a good charge range of them. So rapid ingress them somewhere safe, but these guys can really put out a lot of damage. They're really good for killing Hordes, since they each have a grenade shot that's D6 blast. So that's 6 guys with D6 blast weapons. It's a lot of shots. You can kill a lot of lower toughness Hordes. You take out Terminators like nothing, or Guards. You could probably take out quite a bit of Guard. And then if they have a character unit in there, then it really ups their damage through the roof. And I always just like to have a group of Terminators in here because they're really tanky, they're really threatening, and with the golden light, you can deep strike them somewhere and then take care of a unit and then pick them up at the end of your opponent's turn and put them somewhere else. So if maybe they come back to try to take your home field objective, you can rapid ingress these fellas in, deep strike them in, deal with that threat, and then take them on out of there. Next in my list, I have 2 units of Witch Seekers. I find Witch Seekers are really underrated. The fact they have Scout, you can get these guys, these girls, these ladies onto the midfield objective or any secondaries you might want to get without having to worry about putting your Custodian Guard turn 1 to get threatened by shots. You can use these sisters instead. You can use these sisters to move block or charge block any World Eaters or any armies that may want to try to charge you first turn. So it also allows you to kind of give yourself a little room to push up with these girls and then bring the Custodian Guard behind them. They also have flamer weapons, which are really good against any kind of enemy that likes to bring units back after you kill them. You battle shock them with the sisters and then you kill them with the Terminators or the Custodian Guard. So there's a lot of utility. They are 10 more points than the Prosecutors, but there's so much more utility with them. You use these henchmen I have in my list to hold on to your home field objective, and these sisters can go out and cause a lot of mayhem. They can get a lot of points for you, and you can use the rest of your army to kind of hold on to your objectives and push the enemy away from their objectives while these girls are getting you points and doing a lot of utility. And this is just my proxies for the Inquisitorial Henchmen. They're the same base, about human size, and so you just have 4 Inquisitorial Henchmen and then a Gun Servitor and the Mystic. And what the Mystic does is give you that 12-inch deep strike denial. So now instead of having Kyriadraxis on the home field objective or Prosecutors or Witch Seekers, you can now put these on that objective. You can have Kyriadraxis out kind of towards the middle a little bit, but still enough range that you can threaten anything that does try to come in and try to kill these fellas. A lot more utility. You don't have to worry about any of those 3-inch deep strike shenanigans that can happen. And there's no captains or anything in this list, so you don't have any kind of the free stratagem generation. So you're going to be careful with your stratagems. But Valerian and Trajan allows you the tankiness and the moment shackle for free fight first. And I found before the Dataslate, I always ran no really captains anyways. I only ran pretty much Trajan was my only character I ran. Running these other characters, not having as much CP generation, it doesn't bother me. And the characters are really so much more expensive than some Custodian Guards. So bringing a shield captain is 140 points. That's getting close to the same amount of points as a 4-man Custodian Guard. And knowing your opponent really helps for this army. You can know who to bully and who to not. If you're playing an army you haven't really encountered before and you're using a list like this, it's safer to try to bully them. Sometimes I've found if I stand back to try to figure out what an army is going to do that I haven't really played before, they can sometimes surprise me with some really good shooting or some really good tricks that will catch me off guard. But if I'm pushing them and putting the pressure into them with a game plan I already kind of know, I find I have better results that way than trying to hold back and trying to decide. Some armies are better like that, but I find Custodes you want to rely on your good damage, your toughness to get up the board fast, and then you can kind of figure out, hey, what can these guys do once you get your game plan going. Once you've pushed up, get on some objectives, get your game plan going, then you can figure out, hey, what's my opponent going to do? You want to get your game plan going, get your primary points generation going before you really start dealing with what the opponent's going to do to you. Yes, it's important to know to kind of have that in mind, but you don't want to get too obsessed with what they can do and then getting yourself out of your game plan. And that's the list, really. I think this is probably the list I'll run competitively when I have any kind of BMF matches or I go to any tournaments. This is probably what I'll bring. I do want to play with around a list that just has a ton of Custodian Guard and see how that works, but I think this is probably the list that's going to do the best for me. So I hope you guys enjoy the list. Thanks for watching. Thanks for stopping by.